Deep within an endless green silence, a man's obsession was about to pay off. Colonel Percy Fawcett pushed through the final wall of vines, believing a lost city that would rewrite history lay just ahead. He was never seen again. This is the story of the explorer who died revealing a lost city, a tale where the greatest discovery was the mystery of the seeker himself. By the end, you will understand the chilling truth behind one of exploration's most enduring vanishings. We will follow Fawcett's desperate quest for a phantom civilization, retrace his final, fatal steps into the unknown, and sift through the haunting clues left in his wake. What did he truly find in those shadows, and what price did he pay for the secret? Have you ever wondered what the last thing a great discoverer sees might be? His name was Colonel Percy Harrison Fawcett, a man whose very presence seemed carved from the landscape he sought to conquer. Before the jungle ever called, he was a decorated British artillery officer, a man accustomed to the precise mathematics of trajectory and the rigid order of command. Yet it was another kind of mapping that would consume his life. After leaving the military, Fawcett became a boundary surveyor for the Royal Geographical Society, tasked with charting the wild, disputed borders between Bolivia and Brazil. This was not a tourist's holiday. For years, he trekked through the most hostile reaches of the Amazon, facing diseases that dissolved flesh, insects that clouded the air, and tribes whose intentions were never clear. He survived where others died, earning a reputation not just for toughness, but for an almost supernatural luck. These brutal journeys did more than harden him. They planted a seed of radical belief in those vast, silent forests. Far from any known trade route or settlement, Fawcett began to find strange, weathered artifacts. A crude statuette here, a piece of oddly worked pottery there. To the scientific establishment back in London, these were mere curiosities, perhaps left by nomadic tribes. But to Fawcett, they were fragments of a grander story. He started to believe the Amazon was not a pristine wilderness, but a graveyard, a place where a magnificent, sophisticated civilization had once flourished and then vanished without a trace. This belief crystallized into an obsession in the reading rooms of the National Library of Rio de Janeiro. Here, Fawcett discovered a document known as Manuscript 512. It was a crumbling account written by a Portuguese explorer in the 1700s, detailing a harrowing journey into the interior. The author claimed to have found a lost city of incredible stone architecture with arches, statues, and a temple covered in mysterious inscriptions. Most tantalizingly, he wrote of silver mines and great wealth. For Fawcett, this was not a myth, it was a map. He copied the manuscript by hand, studying its vague geographic clues like a sacred text. He cross-referenced it with his own survey notes and the cryptic legends told by indigenous guides. From this patchwork of evidence, he constructed his life's mission. He called this phantom civilization Z, not El Dorado with its childish promise of gold for the taking, but Z, a place of profound cultural achievement, a city built by a forgotten people who mastered their environment. Fawcett's Z was an answer to a question nobody else was asking: who built the ancient wonders of the world, and could one still be hidden, waiting to be found? His character became the engine of his own quest. Percy Fawcett was not a team player. He was fiercely independent, stubborn, and held a deep contempt for what he called the expert crowd in London. He saw them as armchair academics, men who dismissed his theories from the comfort of their clubs, never having faced the jungle's truth. This arrogance was both his strength and his fatal flaw. It gave him the unshakable conviction to go where others feared, but it also made him dismiss vital warnings. He traveled light, with only a handful of trusted companions, believing large expeditions were clumsy and attracted misfortune. He became a figure of legend in the press, the great explorer chasing a city of ghosts. With each earlier expedition that returned without finding Z, his belief did not waver. It deepened. Every empty stretch of forest, every dead end, was simply proof that he hadn't looked in the right place yet. The obsession was now complete. The seasoned surveyor, the survivor of 100 dangers, had fully transformed into a visionary hunter of shadows, convinced that the greatest discovery in history was waiting for him, and him alone, just beyond the next river. The city he sought was not merely a collection of old stones. For Percy Fawcett, Z represented a cataclysm in human history, a secret so profound it would shatter every textbook. He envisioned a majestic metropolis, the capital of a civilization he believed was the progenitor of all others. In his mind, these were the survivors of Atlantis, a superior race who had sailed across the Atlantic after their continent sank, bringing their advanced knowledge to the Amazon basin. They built Z with monumental stone, using sciences and arts now forgotten, and then vanished, leaving only whispers in the jungle and a void in our story. This was the ultimate prize, a revelation that would place Fawcett not just as an explorer, but as the man who rewrote the origin of civilization itself. This vision stood in stark, defiant contrast to the scientific consensus of his time. Most experts viewed the Amazon as a green desert, its poor soil incapable of supporting the large, settled populations needed to build a grand city. They saw it as a place where only small, nomadic tribes could survive, not a cradle for lost empires. Fawcett's theory was considered romantic nonsense, the desperate fantasy of a man who had spent too long in the sun. Yet here lies the haunting twist. Modern archaeology has begun to uncover a truth that is, in its own way, as astonishing as Fawcett's dream. We now know the ancient Amazon was not a pristine wilderness. Vast networks of geometric earthworks, large-scale land management, and evidence of sophisticated agriculture have been found. There was even a complex of settlements now known as Kuakugu, discovered in the very region Fawcett explored, which some researchers link to the origins of the El Dorado legend. These were not Atlanteans, but they were indeed advanced societies that transformed their environment on a grand scale, societies that later collapsed and were swallowed by the forest. So why does the lost city hold such an iron grip on our imagination? It speaks to a deep human longing for a second chance, for a hidden chapter where greatness was achieved and then misplaced. It promises that history is not fully known, that there are still blank spaces on the map where wonders might be waiting. For Fawcett, this was not an academic exercise. The legend of Z became his personal religion, the central pillar of his identity. Every hardship he endured, every skeptic he scorned, was justified by the glorious moment of discovery he was certain awaited him. He wasn't just searching for ruins, he was marching toward his own apotheosis, ready to deliver a truth so bright it would blind his detractors and crown him the greatest explorer of his age. The stakes could not have been higher, for they were the stakes of a man who had bet his entire life, and eventually his very existence, on a single, shimmering idea. The obsession now demanded its final, most personal sacrifice. In April of 1925, Colonel Percy Fawcett embarked on what he called his ultimate journey. He had secured funding from a consortium of newspapers, promising them the story of the century, but this expedition was different. It was not just a search for a city, it was a pilgrimage. He chose as his only companions his 21-year-old eldest son, Jack, and Jack's best friend, Raleigh Rimmell. This was a deliberate, almost symbolic decision. Fawcett believed large parties were clumsy and doomed, calling them useless mouths to feed. He trusted only in speed, secrecy, and family. He was not just bringing witnesses to his triumph, he was bringing his legacy. The trio, armed with machetes, a theodolite for surveying, and Fawcett's worn copy of manuscript 512, set out from the remote Brazilian outpost to Cuiabá. Their goal was to penetrate the terrifyingly unknown headwaters of the Xingu River, a place so blank on the map it might as well have been the moon. Their method was brutally simple. They carried only what was essential, trading for food with the tribes they encountered, moving with a quiet purpose that larger, noisier expeditions could never manage. For months, letters trickled back, carried by indigenous guides returning to the frontier. The tone was unwavering, even buoyant. Fawcett wrote of difficult terrain and fever, but always framed these as temporary obstacles on the path to glory. In one of his last dispatches, dated May 29, 1925, his words crackled with a feverish certainty. He described crossing a range of mountains no outsider had ever seen and entering a forest teeming with game. The message ended with a line that would echo through history. He wrote, "We hope to get through this region in a few days. You need have no fear of any failure." It was the last coherent message the outside world would ever receive. The final, haunting note arrived weeks later, delivered by a guide who had accompanied them to a point called Dead Horse Camp, a grim spot from a previous journey. This letter was shorter, more urgent. Fawcett reported sending two of their men back due to sickness and stated that he, Jack, and Raleigh were now proceeding alone. He declared they were on the trail of something immense, writing, "Our destination is a mountain, the site of the ancient city." Then the green silence swallowed them whole. The trail of ink and paper ended. All that remained was the vast, waiting jungle and a single, burning question hanging in the air. What did they see when they finally crested that mountain? The silence that followed was not passive. It was a void that demanded to be filled, and so began the second great drama of the Fawcett story, the decades-long hunt for the hunters. For 3 years, there was only a tense, hopeful quiet. Then, in 1928, the first major rescue expedition was launched, funded by the very newspapers that had sponsored the original quest. It was led by an American explorer named George Dyatt, and it set a pattern of grim frustration that would repeat itself for generations. Dyatt followed Fawcett's presumed route and claimed to have met the Kalapalo people, who told him a story of seeing the 3 white men weak and starving, and then watching them head east into the territory of a more hostile tribe. They never returned. Dyatt brought back a few of Fawcett's personal effects, a compass and a nameplate which the Kalapalo said they had found. It was the first tangible proof that something had gone terribly wrong, but it was not the last word. The disappearance became a global obsession, a siren call for adventurers, and a fertile ground for wild speculation. Over 100 people would eventually vanish or die themselves while searching for Fawcett, leading the Amazon to earn a grim new nickname, the Green Hell. Famous figures were drawn into the mystery. Author Peter Fleming, brother of Ian Fleming, mounted an expedition in 1932 and wrote a brilliant, sober book concluding Fawcett was dead, likely killed by accident or disease. Yet the legends flourished, more persistent than the truth. Perhaps Fawcett had found his city of Z and, disillusioned with the modern world, chose to stay there forever, living as a philosopher king. Maybe he was being held as a white god by a remote tribe, forbidden to leave, or perhaps the jungle itself, with its diseases or a jaguar's ambush, had claimed them without a witness. Each theory spoke to a different hope or a different fear, but one narrative, slow and solemn, began to emerge from the jungle itself with the weight of oral history. In the early 1950s, a Brazilian explorer named Orlando Vilas Boas was living with the Kalapalo people, the same tribe George Dyatt had encountered decades earlier. He listened as the elders, unprompted, began to tell a story from their youth. They spoke of 3 white men who had come through their land long ago. The travelers were sick, they were arrogant, and they refused the gifts of food the Kalapalo offered. Worse, they ignored the tribe's urgent warnings not to travel east toward the lands of their enemies. An argument broke out, fear and suspicion took hold. The Kalapalo, believing the strangers would bring misfortune upon them, made a decision. That night, they killed the 3 men and buried their bodies in a shallow grave by the river. To corroborate this story, the Kalapalo led Vilas Boas to a spot and unearthed a set of human bones. In a moment of international frenzy, the remains were examined and declared to be those of Percy Fawcett. The mystery, it seemed, was solved, but the jungle guards its secrets jealously. Decades later, modern DNA analysis was performed on the bones. They did not match the Fawcett family line. They were not the colonel, nor his son, nor his friend. So what does this mean? Did the Kalapalo confuse the location, or were these bones from another unfortunate soul entirely? Their story, passed down for generations, remains hauntingly consistent in its details. Anthropologists who study the region note that the Kalapalo are not known for fabricating such tales, and their account aligns with what we know of Fawcett's stubborn, fever-weakened state. The truth may be a mosaic. Perhaps the oral history is correct in its core event, but the physical evidence was simply lost to time or found and then misplaced by the very search parties that sought it. The jungle reabsorbs everything. This leaves us with a profound and unsettling conclusion. We may never know the precise coordinates of Percy Fawcett's end or the final moments he saw. But in a deeper sense, the Calipolo narrative provides the most human, and therefore the most tragic, resolution. Fawcett did not fall to a mythical beast or vanish into a shimmering city. He likely met a fate born of the very forces that drove him, a collision of obsession, cultural misunderstanding, and the immutable law of the wild. He had spent a lifetime believing he could decode the jungle, only to be undone by a failure to understand the people who lived within it. His greatest discovery, then, was not a city of stone, but the immutable, final mystery of his own fate, a secret the Amazon keeps to this day, allowing only whispers to escape its green walls. Percy Fawcett's story is a timeless loop of obsession and mystery. He vanished seeking a legend, only to become one himself. His disappearance did not end the search, it ignited it, transforming him from a man into a myth that would inspire generations. Countless books, documentary films, and Hollywood adventures have been spun from his fate, each retelling adding another layer to the legend of Z. Yet the most profound part of his legacy is not fictional. The relentless fascination with his quest drove other explorers and archaeologists back into the Amazon, not to find his bones, but to understand the world he believed in. Their work, using tools Fawcett never had, began to uncover a startling truth. They found evidence of large, complex societies, networks of roads, ceremonial plazas, and engineered landscapes that supported thousands of people. Places like Cuicugu showed the Amazon's past was not a green desert, but a cradle of civilization that rose, fell, and was forgotten. In a haunting twist, Fawcett's central idea that a sophisticated ancient culture once thrived there was proven right, even if his specific city of Z was not. So we are left with that final, haunting question: was Percy Fawcett a visionary, a man who saw a hidden truth in the fragments that others dismissed? Or was he tragically misguided, chasing a personal fantasy that led him and his son to a pointless, anonymous end? Perhaps he was both. His unshakable conviction was the fuel for his courage and the cause of his doom. He reminds us that the line between groundbreaking discovery and tragic folly is often drawn by the thinnest of reeds. What do you believe happened in those final days? Do you think the Calipolo story holds the truth, or does another explanation linger in the shadows of the Xingu? Share your theory in the comments below. If you are captivated by history's greatest enigmas, subscribe for more deep dives into the past's unanswered questions. In the end, the seeker of the lost city became the very mystery he sought to solve, a permanent ghost in the green cathedral of his dreams.